Hey everybody, thanks for watching. So now we've seen in the last few years many different Indian tribes coming forward and making it public, making it known as to what's been happening to their people on their land over the last few years. You know, you have a lot of peaceful Native Americans who have reservations and land that belong to them, that you now have the government coming into these lands and basically either disrupting the land or basically going back on, contracts that have stood for over 100 years. And it's happening in secret. There's a lot of stuff going on behind closed doors, and you have a lot of Indian tribes coming forward trying to make it known what's happening to them and their people, what's being basically swept under the carpet. So just like the news media does with us, whenever these tribes come forward and try to speak, they focus on somebody in the group that has a negative background, that has a run-in with the law, and try to make the whole conversation about that person in their past. Same thing they do with us. When a black person is killed, they try to make it like, because he stole something in the 6th grade, he deserved to be killed. So you got to look at and see what's going on with these Native Americans, with these Indian people, because it basically speaks to our situation as well. But not only that, we are in the same boat as them. So we need to join in this argument. We need to let people know publicly what's going on and what has happened to the true Native Americans in America. And this is something that we have not done. Now you have the Washita Nation that had to really fight to basically get themselves recognized as an actual Native American, tribe. And, they went through so many different courts, but they were basically not even, recognized as being real. It was, recognized as being a fabrication or a lie when they can prove their history, which they end up doing in 1992. So you have to understand, when you have the Washita tribe, the Washita Nation, who is recognized as one of the oldest, they recognize as one of the oldest living groups of people on the planet. So we found artifacts from their civilizations in America, which they basically own. Louisiana, you might as well say, was their territory, as well as much of, you might as well say, the middle of America. And they had a lot of land that belonged to them that was taken from them, from the French and Spanish and, of course, the colonies. So they had been fighting, first, one, to be recognized, and two, to have their land back. So now for years, the Washita Nation has, been having these court battles with the government. A lot of people have absolutely no clue what was going on with that situation. But when you look at the findings of the Washita Nation and what has been proven about their civilization, and that they are, now recognized as one of the oldest civilizations on the planet, they basically trace their civilization back to Pangea, which Pangea would be when all the land masses was connected. And they trace their people back to, when the land masses of the world was connected before, they split. They attest to Africa being connected with America. So if you don't know about Pangea, look it up. Pangea is something that all, researchers and scientists agree that the land masses we know of today was connected at some point, and, eventually separated. So they trace, their origins back that far. So we're talking about, we have found artifacts from these people dating, 4000 BCE. So we are not basically given the respect of the so-called Native Americans, which don't get much respect either. When African people was here thousands of years before, Native Americans, thousands of years before Columbus, thousands of years before slavery, and it's been proven. So a lot of people, you have a lot of people who don't agree with the out of Africa theory. And one of the things I always say is, you have to look at the out of Africa theory and understand what they're not saying. What they're not saying is there's a lot of land masses that is now underwater. So you can't definitively say that civilization began in Africa. What I always say is, it seems as if civilization reemerged in Africa after a global destruction, a global catastrophe that happened. It seems as if civilization reemerged in Africa, because clearly we could look around and see that there were many ancient civilizations around the world that predate a lot of the dates given by scientists, and a lot of these dates are being changed year after year and being pushed back further and further, i.e. the Egyptian pyramids, who they are now believing the pyramids to be, almost 100,000 years, the Sphinx to be, over 30,000 years. And I talk about this in my videos, as I said, when the Africans, migrated up north, and they went up north as if they knew what was there. And when they got into Kemet, the Great Pyramid was already there. A lot of this stuff was already there. And I believe the out of Africa theory is basically where we reemerged, and, they won't tell us exactly what happened before that. We have very little evidence of the history before ancient Kemet, because this is where it seems like everything picked up from. We trace writing back to ancient Kemet. We trace so many things back to ancient Kemet. And then that's basically it. It's like, what happened before that time? Who were the civilizations, that built the pyramids, that existed before this time? So that's something you have to think about. But the out of Africa theory is not agreed upon. And one of the things you have to understand is it's basically proven in a lot of different ways. One of the ways is, one, they found a lot of artifacts, found a lot of bodies, a lot of ancient civilizations that go back, thousands of years. And speaking about, Africans being in the Americas, you have to understand first of all, if Pangea really existed, which many scholars agree on, if it actually existed, then, you can conclude first that African people was on the planet first. So it's completely plausible that, that we were in the Americas. So this is one of the things I don't understand about the argument when people want to argue who was in the Americas first, when clearly African people existed on the planet before any other group of people. So you would think that we was there first, and we have proven it. But with the out of Africa theory, what they have found is the Australoids, who basically migrated over to the Africans who migrated over to Australia, then sailed from Australia into South America and eventually made a journey up to North America, to the Americas. And what happened was you had Siberia, you had in Russia, you had a land bridge that basically extended to Alaska and allowed them to basically cross into Northern America. So you had the Mongoloids basically cross into Northern America and come down and end up meeting with these Australoids. And the race they produce is the so-called Native Americans. So now before these people crossed the Bering Strait and came down into Northern America, the Australoids was already there. African people was already in the Americas. Some of the oldest bodies that they have found, people died due to war, because when they first met, they clashed and there was war, little squabbles. But eventually they obviously settled, whatever problems they had and end up intermarrying and, having children, which are, as I said, the Native Americans. So now it says here, a new genetic study, however, is threatening to transform theories about who the original Native Americans were after finding certain tribes in the Amazon were related to the Aborigines in Australia. The findings suggest America may have actually experienced multiple waves of migration thousands of years ago, rather than just one that spread down through the continent from the north. Geneticists have found that Native American tribes living in the Amazon are mostly closely related to Aborigines from Australia, Papua New Guinea, and the Andaman Islands, as shown in the image above, where warm colors show the greatest level of genetic affinity. White circles show populations with no genetic link. Australian Aborigines, like those pictured above, are thought to be descended from one of the earliest groups of modern humans to migrate out of Africa. It seems as well as colonizing Australasia, they also extended as far away as South America, leaving their mark in the DNA of native people living in the Amazon today. Now, it makes sense that these people would have Andamese DNA from the Andaman tribe, because when you look at the model of the out of Africa theory, you see that this is where they went. They went to the Indus Valley, where we find the Andaman people. Now, the BBC released a documentary on exactly these same things, expressing what they found and all the research that has been proven to show that African people were in the Americas long before anybody else. They found cave art from where they left, where they boated from Australia all the way over, into South America. Everybody knows about the researcher, I forget his name, who basically sat in a canoe and let the current take them from Australia straight into South America. And numerous studies, tests has been done to show that the Africans had knowledge of sailing and they had boats. We know about the ancient Egyptians having things found in their tombs and in their bodies that can only come from the Americas. So this is something that I don't understand why people have a problem dealing with. And it's one of those things where you have to look at the fact that people are racist and they just don't want to admit what we already know and what the facts show. And despite all the evidence, people will still look you in your face and disagree with it because they don't want to accept anything that challenges European domination or the European narrative, or white supremacy for that matter. So we got to understand what the proof is actually saying. So when we look at the Native Americans, and we can say, yes, even still, these people are Native Americans. They were still here before Columbus. They was here before the colonies. They coexisted with Africans. And as I said before, I talked about this before, you have many African people and many Native American people who have released books claiming to be native to the Americas. You have the so-called people who we call Native Americans also saying, well, yeah, these people were African. We talked about Columbus and his diary saying when he went to the South America that it was already, African people there, dark-skinned people there. And, it's something that has been proven. It's something that has been proven. We can go back to the Olmec and look at the Olmec and look at these giant heads, being found all in Mexico, South America. These heads, similar heads have been even found in Canada. So this is something that we can prove. And a lot of people, it's just going to say, so what? Has been colonized already. These people own the country. What is the point? And the point is, one, that we have a record of the deception of these people. The problem is, this government has taken a stance of, morality. What is true, what is good, what is right. They have done things to basically right their wrongs. So when you look at the fact that we can prove we was here before they took the land from us, and the fact that, slavery happened and everything happened after that, so many peoples have been compensated for what governments has done to them. And since they have taken a stance as not being a tyrant, not being a person who commits genocide and basically, gloats about it, you have a lot of different instances where you have governments basically repay what they owe to the people that they, colonized and basically committed genocide on or killed thousands of. And this is why you have a lot of people coming forward and saying, hey, we own such and such land and we want it back. We want this land to belong to the people who it rightfully belongs to. And when you have people coming forward and expressing facts and truth about certain things, you will hope stuff get done. The problem with these Native Americans coming forward is they don't realize that the powers that be, the people that are in control of this country, don't give a shit. These are the same people who basically, wiped us out. But it's not the same America that existed, before 1913, as I talked about before. So these people really don't care, but you have to look at the facts, and the facts should still be known. One of the things you have to understand is a lot of people really believe that African people came over to the Americas on slave ships. Even when you calculate the numbers that they gave for the slaves that came over, it doesn't equate to the amount of slaves that was, on record in America, during the time of slavery, which it was way more people already here, of course. So, it's not that they brought all the slaves from Africa here. Africans was already here. And one of the questions you have to ask yourself is, as I said before, if this is about slave labor, if this is about, enslaving people and getting people to do your work and do work for you and get stuff done for free, slave labor, free labor, why would you go through the trouble of going into Africa and rounding up all these Africans? What you have to go through to do that. Why would you go through the trouble of doing all that, rounding these people up, putting them on a boat, sailing them, across the Atlantic where, You could lose most of them or all of them. You got to throw some overboard. You know, you got to risk fighting on the way across. Why go through all that when you can land in America without going through this stuff and already have the natives there? Why not just enslave those people? What is the point? I mean, if you're enslaving people anyway, they slaughtered the Native Americans. So why not just go to America, enslave the so-called Native Americans if they wasn't black, enslave those people and get them to do your work? What was it that was different about the Africans that they had to bring Africans all the way over here to do their work? So that's one of the questions you really got to ask yourself, and it opens up the door to a lot of other questions. You know, why not just enslave the Native Americans that was here instead of going through the trouble of bringing us over here? And when you read a lot of the books by the Native Americans they put out explaining that they made deals with the Europeans for them to help capture the African people that was here, the black people that was already here, and you know, they gave them supplies and they armed them. This is something that we see, you know, still the MO of this government to this day. You know, they go into these countries and they arm these people to basically go against the regime, to go against the people in power. And this is something that they've been doing for, you know, hundreds of years. And, you know, the powers that be understand, as I always talk about, that, you know, they wanted to enslave African people for a reason, which we'll get into a little bit. So, you know, you look at everything, all the evidence. There is very little evidence that supports only the so-called Native Americans being here alone. It's bullshit. First of all, one, we know that they mixed with somebody when they came down, the Mongoloids. And we now know it to be the Australoids. But we know that the Australoids or the Africans was here long before. We know that the Egyptians was coming over long before. We know the African people was coming over long before. This is proven. So, you know, I laugh at people who always say, you know, you don't like Africa, go back to, you don't like America, go back to Africa. You know, when we was already here. So you have the Ouachita Nation, the mound builders. These people were called the mound builders. We know that Louisiana and that area around there is known for the mounds. And these people existed, you know, and they were building and growing their civilization. And you had the native people in the Americas living, growing their civilization, existing. And when you understand history, you can look back and see exactly what happened to them. This history is just not taught to us. It's not told to us. A lot of Europeans have no clue about their true history, and it's hidden from them because, of course, they don't want them to understand that, you know, what their ancestors did to basically secure the Americas. A lot of people deal with that. A lot of people don't want to process the guilt of what happened, which is why they tell us to shut up about slavery. And you can't deny people who have been wrong, you know, the right to speak on it, especially when we're seeing, you know, the result of that wrong still manifesting to this day. And a lot of people want to say, you know, shut up, it's over, slavery's over, but we're still experiencing the effects of it, and we're still not being treated equally and fairly because of it. So when we can look back at our history and say, what the hell, you know, this belongs to us. You know, this is who we really are. Of course, we have the right to speak on, you know, what has taken place. So, you know, you had these people living and existing. If you know history, you can go back and basically see exactly what happened. You go back, you know, we know, after Rome basically retook Spain from the Moors. And, you know, Ferdinand and Isabella was crowned king and queen and ruled that nation. You can see the trickle-down effect from Rome rebuilding their strength and gaining control of Spain and other territories. They then trickle down into northern Africa. We know about the Papal Bull. We know about Dum Diversis. We know about Pope Nicholas V, basically decreeing to Alfonso V to basically go into West Africa and conquer, you know, the people. To basically conquer the people and go in there and enslave African people. This is actually, you know, this actually happened. And people just really don't look at the facts. Even if you don't want to believe about the Papal Bull and Dum Diversis or what have you, did Rome go into Africa and enslave people? Yes, they did. But they disguised themselves as the Portuguese.